Rain pounded the cracked asphalt as thunder rumbled overhead, shaking the streetlights along the nearly deserted city block. A small, battered car shuddered as it screeched to a halt in front of a luxury hospital's emergency entrance. The backseat door flung open, and a young woman clutched her swollen belly, grimacing through the sharp pangs of labor. Her face was pale, streaked with rainwater and tears, and her lips trembled as she gasped for air. "Please, please, can you take me inside?" She begged, her voice barely audible over the storm. She looked at the driver, a man in an immaculately tailored suit with the arrogance of someone born into privilege, and hope and fear flickered in her eyes. The man's lips curled into a mocking smile as he leaned back in his seat, tapping his expensive watch. "You want me to do what exactly?" he sneered. The rain-plastered hair clung to her forehead as she shivered, partly from the cold, partly from fear. I'm about to have my baby," she cried, clutching her stomach with both hands as another contraction tore through her. I can't get there alone," the man laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that cut through the storm like glass. "Do you really think I drive random strangers around in the middle of a thunderstorm? Look at you, you're a mess, a wet, desperate, pathetic mess." His words were deliberate, each one meant to humiliate, meant to make her feel smaller, weaker. She stumbled, nearly falling onto the wet pavement, and he did nothing. Bystanders who had paused under the hospital awning watched silently, some shifting uncomfortably, others whispering and smirking, feeding the woman's humiliation. She tried to steady herself, tears mingling with the rain on her cheeks. "Please, I don't have anyone else, I just need to get inside." He leaned forward now, face twisted in mock sympathy. "You're asking me of all people to risk getting drenched or worse, inconvenienced because what? You think crying and clutching your stomach will move me?" He shook his head, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Honey, let me give you a tip. Life doesn't care about your problems, and neither do I." Her breaths were ragged now, and a piercing scream escaped her lips as another contraction gripped her. She sank to her knees, hands pressed desperately against the hood of the car for support, rainwater pooling around her trembling body. "Please, just help me." Her voice broke in despair, echoing through the empty street. A couple of people under the awning exchanged glances, clearly debating whether to step in, but the fear of confrontation or the allure of gossip kept them silent. The woman's shame became as tangible as the pouring rain, her vulnerability a magnet for the man's arrogance. He leaned back, smirking, enjoying the power he wielded over her moment of desperation. "You know," he said slowly, almost mockingly, "I have a very busy night ahead of me. Meetings, dinners, private jets, and yet here I am listening to some abandoned woman beg for a ride." He emphasized the word abandoned with a cruel grin as if it were her greatest failing. The woman's teeth clenched as she tried to speak again, but a combination of pain, fear, and humiliation made her words stumble. She wanted to scream at him, to beg harder, to appeal to the faint glimmer of humanity she prayed existed inside him, but every attempt seemed useless. A sharp wind blew through, scattering puddles across the sidewalk, and her cries turned into desperate wails. "Please," she sobbed, I don't know what else to do." And then, in the silence that followed one particularly fierce rumble of thunder, she froze. Something in her eyes, a glint that no one could fully explain, hinted at a truth lurking beneath the chaos. A hidden strength, a secret that could change everything in a heartbeat. She was more than just a desperate, abandoned woman in labor. The man, oblivious, adjusted his cufflinks and laughed again. "Well, if you think tears and pleading are going to get you anywhere, you're sorely mistaken." He leaned back and prepared to drive away, as if the sound of her suffering were nothing more than background noise to his evening. But the secret she carried, the reality of her existence, was about to shatter the world he thought he controlled. Unbeknownst to him, her life, her pain, and the very moment he believed himself untouchable were intertwined with a truth that could stop him in his tracks, leaving him pale and speechless. A truth that could turn the tables in ways he could never imagine. Her breath hitched again, her voice barely above a whisper. "If only you knew, if only you knew." And just as the man was about to roll up the window, smirk intact, a sudden wave of anticipation and tension gripped the scene. Everyone nearby seemed to hold their breath. Something big, something utterly unexpected, was about to happen. The audience, whether the people on the sidewalk, the staff inside the hospital, or viewers watching this story unfold, could almost feel the twist lurking just beyond reach, ready to shatter assumptions and reveal hidden realities. The rain continued to fall relentlessly, the storm now mirroring the tumult of emotions. a mix of fear, helplessness, arrogance, and impending revelation. And right in that moment, viewers should sense it. The man's smug confidence is about to be undone. The screen should linger on her face, on the raw, unfiltered pain and courage. Every wrinkle of fear, every tear-streaked cheek, every flinch of vulnerability tells a story that words alone cannot capture. And in the shadows of that very vulnerability lies a secret the man cannot even begin to comprehend. Now, before we move forward and reveal what happens next, let's engage with you, the audience. Imagine yourself in her shoes. Facing desperation, humiliation, and a seemingly uncaring world, what would you do? Have you ever been judged unfairly, dismissed, or treated cruelly when you were at your most vulnerable? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. We want to hear where you're watching from and how you've faced moments of injustice in your life. Every comment will be read and appreciated because these stories of resilience, courage, and quiet strength deserve to be celebrated. But before we see how this ends, let's go back to where this story truly began. Long before the storm, before the rain-drenched confrontation at the hospital doors, the young woman, whose name was Isha, had been living a life that few outside her small, weathered apartment could understand. The walls were thin, peeling at the corners, but inside she tried to cultivate warmth and hope, however faint. Her days were filled with quiet struggles, constant worry, and the unrelenting grind of survival. Isha was 28, slender but strong, with eyes that told stories of both resilience and heartache. Her hair, often tied back in a simple braid, framed a face that held kindness like a secret jewel. She wasn't wealthy, never had been. She had no luxuries, no silver spoons. What she did have, though, was a heart that refused to harden despite life's repeated blows. She cared deeply for her neighbors, for stray animals, for the children she tutored in the evenings to make a little extra income. Her life was small in material wealth, but vast in empathy. Most mornings began before the sun rose. Aisha would shuffle into the tiny kitchen, heat water for tea, and check her budget meticulously. Bills were due every week, sometimes even every day, and every coin was accounted for. She had recently learned she was pregnant again, and while the news should have been joyous, it added a weight to her chest that seemed almost unbearable. The father, a man who had promised support, had vanished the moment her condition became obvious. He left no forwarding address, no explanation, only a trail of broken promises. Despite all this, Aisha had found small moments of joy. She spent afternoons reading to her 2-year-old son, Sami, who was the bright center of her world. He had the loudest laugh she had ever known, and even on her worst days, that sound could make the heaviness in her chest lift, if only for a moment. Her apartment overlooked a busy city street, and she would often sit by the window, tracing the movement of cars and pedestrians, dreaming of a life where she didn't have to beg, scrape, or worry about tomorrow's bills. But dreams were dangerous. They reminded her of the life she didn't have. And so she clung to reality, measured, controlled, and painfully precise. In the mornings, Aisha worked as a part-time cleaner at one of the city's upscale hotels. The work was grueling, often leaving her hands raw and aching, but it was honest. She hated asking for help, hated feeling like a burden, yet she couldn't escape the fact that she needed every cent. Many of her colleagues looked down on her, seeing only her worn clothes, her exhaustion, and her quiet demeanor. Some whispered about her unlucky circumstances, or speculated on why a woman alone, pregnant, and struggling to make ends meet would choose to stay in such a menial position. But Isha ignored them because the alternative, anger, bitterness, was a luxury she could not afford. Today, however, was different. Today, her world felt like it was tilting on its axis. It started that morning with a sharp pain while preparing breakfast. She tried to dismiss it, telling herself it was just cramps, that it would pass. But as she bent over the sink, rubbing her belly and trying to steady her breathing, she realized the pain wasn't going away, it was intensifying. Every wave was sharper, every contraction closer together. Sami toddled over, tugging at her skirt. "Mama," he asked softly, sensing her discomfort. Isha forced a smile, hiding the fear that crept into her chest. "I'm okay, sweetie. Go play with your toys for a bit, okay?" But inside, her heart pounded. She knew what was happening. She was in labor, and she was alone, without a husband, without family nearby. The nearest hospital was a 15-minute drive, and she didn't own a car. Every second mattered. She reached for her phone, fumbling with trembling hands, and dialed numbers she had memorized but hoped she wouldn't have to call. Friends were busy, neighbors were unavailable, and the taxi services were either full or unresponsive. Her pulse quickened. Panic nibbled at the edges of her calm demeanor. How would she get to the hospital? How would she manage if the contractions kept coming at this pace? She couldn't risk giving birth in her apartment. With no other options, she called a rideshare service. And that's when fate, or perhaps the cruel irony of life, placed her in the presence of the man she would later come to know as her antagonist, though she had no idea who he was at the time. His name was Adnan, a billionaire who lived a life so removed from hers that their worlds should have never intersected. And yet he happened to be driving that night, dressed in a suit that cost more than Aisha had earned in a year, ready to attend a gala that would showcase his wealth and power. Meanwhile, Aisha's contractions intensified. Each wave made her wince, her body trembling from the effort. She wrapped herself in a coat that smelled faintly of detergent, kissed her sleeping son gently on the forehead, and whispered a promise to return quickly. She hoped against hope that help would come in time. She descended the stairs of her building slowly, clutching the railing, wincing as each contraction hit. The streets were slick with recent rain, and she navigated puddles carefully, determined not to slip. Every step brought with it a mix of fear and courage, a potent cocktail that made her feel both small and monumental at the same time. Aisha arrived at the curb and saw the headlights approaching. Relief surged for a moment as she thought help had finally arrived, but the relief was short-lived. The car slowed and came to a stop. A man stepped out of the vehicle with an air of impatience, leaning against the door, looking her up and down as if she were a curiosity. His polished shoes reflected the streetlights, and his expression radiated entitlement. This was Adnan, though she did not yet know his identity or his power. To him, she was just another problem, a minor inconvenience in a night filled with luxury and influence. He did not know that the woman standing before him was about to give birth, that she was struggling against the very world he had built, a world of privilege that seemed completely inaccessible to her. To Aisha, every second felt like a lifetime. The fear of losing control, of failing her unborn child, pressed on her chest. She needed help, and yet the man before her radiated the exact opposite: judgment, arrogance, and an almost intoxicating disregard for her plight. And here we begin to understand the stakes. This day was not just about getting to the hospital. It was about survival, dignity, and the chance to protect her child. Every decision, every step, and every plea carried weight far beyond the ordinary. If she failed, it wouldn't just be a temporary setback. It could mean catastrophe. But beyond the immediate danger, there was another layer to Aisha's story. Beneath her worn clothes, beneath the exhaustion and tears, was a woman of quiet strength and hidden resilience. She had faced hardship before, endured loss, and kept moving forward, often in silence. And in moments of crisis like this one, that resilience would become her most potent weapon. Aisha's story was not merely about desperation. It was about courage under fire, about finding strength when the world seems determined to crush you. She was the embodiment of every single person who has ever struggled alone, who has fought for their children, for dignity, for survival, and yet refused to give up hope. And now, as the rain poured, the hospital lights glimmered faintly in the distance, and the man before her remained unmoved. The clock was ticking. Every contraction, every second, reminded her that help was not guaranteed. Yet she did what she had always done. She stood tall, summoned what courage remained, and prepared to fight for her life and the life of her child, unaware that the very man who seemed her enemy might also hold the key to a twist she could never imagine. This was the world before the confrontation, the quiet, struggling, deeply human life of Aisha. It's crucial to understand her character, her fears, her dreams, and her vulnerabilities, because it is this foundation that makes the coming events so powerful, so emotional, and so life-altering. It's not just a story of humiliation and cruelty. It is the story of courage, resilience, and the moment when destiny intervenes in the lives of ordinary people, showing that even in despair, miracles can unfold in the most unexpected ways. The city lights blurred under the pouring rain as Aisha approached the sleek, polished entrance of the luxury hospital. Her stomach clenched with every contraction, each wave of pain sharper than the last. She clutched her coat tighter, rainwater soaking through the fabric, her shoes slipping slightly on the slick sidewalk. The hospital's revolving doors glinted, reflecting neon lights, perfectly manicured hedges, and polished marble, an intimidating monument of wealth and authority. For someone like her, it was a palace she had no right to enter. Adnan, leaning against the car with a smirk that could cut glass, watched her stagger toward him. His perfectly tailored suit was untouched by the rain, his expensive leather shoes pristine. To him, Aisha was an inconvenience, a scene from some melodrama he had no interest in participating in. He adjusted his cufflinks as she neared, the sound of the rain and thunder doing nothing to mask the cruel amusement in his voice. You really expect me to help you?" he asked, eyebrow raised, his tone dripping with scorn. "A pregnant, wet, desperate woman in labor, you think I should drive you to the hospital?" Isha's voice trembled, but she forced it out. "Yes, please, I don't have anyone else. I need help now." The man leaned back, folding his arms. "Need help," he scoffed. "Sweetheart, need is relative, isn't it? I need a dry, warm car. I need to keep my schedule. I need my comfort. You're messy. Inconvenient, and frankly, you're pathetic." Isha stumbled as another contraction hit, doubling her over the hood of the car. She gritted her teeth, trying not to scream, but pain tore through her. Her vision blurred with rain and tears. She looked up at him, desperation flashing in her eyes. "Please, I don't have anyone else. I don't know what else to do. My baby, I can't, I ca." The crowd began to gather under the hospital awning, strangers, employees, a few late-night visitors. Some whispered, some smirked, and others pretended not to notice. But their silence only deepened her humiliation. Every glance felt like judgment. Every smirk was a reminder of her supposed inferiority. And Adnan basked in it, the center of a cruel performance in which she was the unwilling star. He leaned closer, his face a mask of mock sympathy. "Do you know what it looks like when someone begs in the rain?" he said slowly, relishing the words. "It looks pitiful, and you are the very definition of it." She swallowed hard, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. I just need help. I don't care about anything else, please." Her voice cracked, each word raw with fear. Adnan straightened, adjusting his tie, and laughed. "You don't care about anything else? Let me guess, you think crying and pleading is going to make me care? Life doesn't care about you, and I really don't either." Another contraction hit, forcing her to sink to her knees on the wet pavement. Her hands pressed against her belly as if she could somehow shield her unborn child from the world's cruelty. She gasped, trying to breathe through the pain, but the words caught in her throat. A few onlookers shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene. Some of the hotel staff peeked from the glass doors, whispering among themselves, but no one moved. Everyone seemed paralyzed by fear, by politeness, or perhaps by the silent thrill of watching someone else's misery unfold. Aisha's vulnerability was on full display, and in that she became the unwitting spectacle of the night. Adnan smirked, glancing at the crowd as if seeking their validation. "See," he said, "everyone agrees you're a spectacle, an inconvenience, a nuisance in the storm, and frankly the world is better off without listening to your whining." Her breaths became more shallow, panic seeping in alongside the physical pain. "Please," she whispered. "My baby, I need." The words trailed off as another contraction doubled her over, shaking her to the core. She looked up at him, something almost pleading in her gaze, something beyond words. Just for a few minutes, help me, take me to the hospital." Adnan's lips curled in a twisted smile. "You know what the funny thing is," he said, leaning casually against his car. "I could call the cops, or just leave, or worse, let everyone watch you here, struggling, writhing, pathetic. And I wouldn't lose a second of sleep. In fact, it would be entertaining." Aisha's heart raced. Her hands shook as she pressed against her belly, the weight of her helplessness almost unbearable. Why are you like this?" she whispered. "Like what?" he countered, feigning innocence. "Like a man who knows he doesn't have to care, like someone who enjoys watching weakness. Isn't that what life is about? Survival of the fittest." Storm raged around them, rain soaking both of them, yet the disparity couldn't have been more clear. She was drenched, desperate in pain, and utterly dependent. He was untouched, comfortable, and cruel, her vulnerability making him laugh, and the onlookers, silent or smirking, added to her sense of isolation. She felt trapped, alone, humiliated, and powerless. With every passing moment, the situation escalated. Another contraction tore through her body, leaving her gasping on the wet pavement. She fell forward, pressing her forehead against the hood of the car, a tear-streaked, rain-soaked figure of desperation. "Please, please," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of fear and pain. A nearby security guard glanced at the scene but quickly turned away, muttering something under his breath. No one stepped forward, and Adnan, sensing the culmination of the power he held, smiled wider. "You see," he said to the crowd, his voice carrying, "this is what desperation looks like, and you're at the center of it. Aren't you lucky?" Aisha lifted her head just slightly, her eyes blazing, not with anger but with something deeper, a silent promise, a glimmer of strength beneath the fear. Something in her gaze hinted that she wasn't entirely powerless, that the world had not yet stripped her of all agency. But Adnan didn't notice. He was too busy enjoying the spectacle, too wrapped up in his arrogance to see the quiet storm building behind her pain. He straightened, preparing to leave, as if her suffering were a minor inconvenience in his meticulously planned night. And that's when it happened. A subtle shift, almost imperceptible to anyone else but not to the audience. There was something about her posture, the set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes, that hinted at a hidden reality, a secret force that could upend everything in an instant. Unbeknownst to him, Aisha's life was about to intersect with his world in a way he could never have imagined. There was more to her than what the rain, the poverty, and the humiliation revealed. Something that could stop his arrogance dead in its tracks, shattering the illusion of control he so desperately clung to. As he reached for the car door, ready to drive away and leave her writhing in the rain, the camera would linger on her face, capturing the raw emotion. Fear, pain, dignity, and a glimmer of a secret yet to be revealed. The audience should feel it. The tension, the injustice, the sheer human will struggling against cruelty. The storm, the crowd, the cruel billionaire, they all faded in the intensity of that moment. Because in the next heartbeat, something would happen that would leave everyone stunned, changing the trajectory of Aisha's life forever. The rain-soaked street trembled under the storm, and Aisha's breaths came in short, ragged gasps. Every contraction left her trembling, clutching her swollen belly as if the life within her were the only thing that mattered. Her plea for help had gone ignored, dismissed, ridiculed. And yet, in the midst of humiliation and exhaustion, a quiet determination flickered in her eyes. Adnan, still leaning against his car, smirked and reached for the door handle. "You know what?" he said, voice dripping with arrogance. "I think I'll leave you here. Maybe next time you'll remember that crying doesn't get you anywhere." "Survival isn't for everyone," he laughed, a harsh sound that mingled with the thunder overhead. "Maybe someone else will help, maybe not, but I have better things to do than—" A sudden, sharp sound cut through the storm, the squeal of tires on wet asphalt followed by footsteps racing across the puddled street. A figure emerged from the crowd of onlookers, small at first, obscured by the umbrellas, but growing larger in significance with every step. "Stop!" a firm voice rang out. "Leave her alone." Adnan turned, eyes narrowing. "And who are you supposed to be?" The figure pushed forward through the crowd. A woman, elegant yet fierce, with a presence that made the onlookers part like the sea. She wore a coat that flapped in the wind, and her expression was a mixture of anger, disbelief, and authority. "This is my daughter," she declared. Her voice carried the weight of law, power, and an unyielding moral compass. "You will not treat her this way." For a moment, the world seemed to pause. Thunder rolled in the distance, but it was as if even the storm had hushed itself to hear the words. Aisha froze, confusion and disbelief flashing across her face. "Mom," she whispered, her voice shaking, not entirely from exhaustion. Adnan's smirk faltered. His laughter, which had been so cruel moments ago, caught in his throat. What did you say?" His voice trembled ever so slightly, betraying a crack in his armor of arrogance. "This is my daughter," the woman repeated, stepping closer. "And you will not, under any circumstances, treat her like this. Do you understand?" The words were sharp, cutting through the storm, through the fear, through every ounce of humiliation Aisha had endured. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, the realization dawned on Adnan. "My daughter," he stammered, disbelief clouding his features. His confident stance wavered, the smirk replaced by pale shock. He glanced around at the onlookers, at the small woman in front of him, Aisha, soaked, trembling, but with a quiet, undeniable dignity, and slowly his mind began to comprehend the enormity of the mistake he had made. This can't be," he muttered under his breath. The woman stepped closer, placing a hand firmly on Aisha's shoulder. "It is, and I won't allow you to humiliate her or jeopardize her safety any longer." Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, met Adnan's, and it was clear she was not someone to be trifled with. Adnan's face went pale. His usual arrogance, his smugness, the confidence that had allowed him to mock, belittle, and dismiss vanished. In its place was pure, unfiltered panic. He took a step back, as if physically retreating from the authority radiating from the two women. You don't understand," he started, voice shaking. I didn't." "You did," Aisha's mother interrupted, her tone firm. "You did exactly what you wanted, mock her, humiliate her, treat her like she was less than human, and now you will face the consequences." The storm seemed to intensify in perfect cinematic irony, rain lashing down, wind tugging at clothes and hair, reflecting the turmoil of the moment. The onlookers, previously passive, now whispered in awe. The scene had shifted completely, from a tale of humiliation to one of revelation, justice, and stunned disbelief. Aisha's face, streaked with rain and tears, glowed with a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and triumph. She could barely speak, but the strength in her eyes said more than words ever could. She had survived, endured, and finally the truth had aligned with the moment. Adnan, shaking, tried to regain control, but it was too late. His carefully constructed world of dominance and control had collapsed in an instant. The revelation had stripped him bare, exposing the stark reality. He had no power over Aisha, no leverage, and no understanding of the world he had insulted so cruelly. "You," he stammered, trying to articulate some form of dominance, some last shred of control, but his voice faltered. Every word seemed hollow. The humiliation he had inflicted now boomeranged upon him in ways he could not escape. "This isn't over," he finally managed, voice cracking. But even as he said it, the threat carried no weight, no authority. The room, though outside in the rain, surrounded by onlookers, was no longer his. The tables had turned. Aisha's mother nodded toward the hospital doors. "Get her inside, immediately, and make sure you never forget this lesson. Treating others with cruelty has consequences." Two security staff, finally realizing the gravity of the situation, hurried forward to escort Aisha safely into the hospital. She stumbled, weak and exhausted, but the presence of her mother beside her lent her strength. Adnan could only watch, rooted in disbelief, as the very person he had humiliated was swept out of his reach, protected by truth, authority, and unshakable familial support. At that moment, the audience should feel a mix of emotions: vindication, relief, awe at the power of revelation, and the undeniable justice that had finally arrived. Aisha's suffering, though intense and painful, had not been in vain. The cruel billionaire who had believed himself untouchable had been exposed, his arrogance shattered in front of witnesses and, more importantly, in front of the person who mattered most, Aisha herself. As she stepped through the hospital doors, another contraction hit. But this time it was different. She was not alone, she was not powerless, and the very man who had threatened her dignity was now powerless to intervene. The camera, or the imagination of the viewer, lingers on Adnan's pale, stunned face. His mouth opens and closes, searching for words, searching for control, but finding none. The storm continues around him, echoing the inner chaos of his shattered pride. And then, as Aisha is ushered safely inside, the final layer of the twist reveals itself. She is not only the daughter of a powerful woman, but she is also connected to resources, influence, and protection that Adnan had no idea existed. The humiliation he had inflicted is about to translate into consequences that will reshape his world as much as it reshaped hers. Inside, Aisha collapses into her mother's arms, exhausted, drenched, but alive. The storm outside continues, but within the hospital's warm corridors, there is a profound sense of safety, of victory, and of justice realized. For a brief, powerful moment, the audience should linger on this tableau. Aisha, vulnerable yet resilient. Her mother, authoritative and protective. And Adnan, stunned, powerless, and finally forced to reckon with the enormity of his cruelty. The twist is complete. The power dynamic has shifted entirely, the antagonist humbled and the hero elevated, not through wealth, not through cunning, but through courage, truth, and the unwavering support of someone who truly sees her worth. The stage is now set for the next chapter. The consequences Adnan must face and the redemption and triumph that await Aisha. But for this moment, the focus is clear. Cruelty meets justice, and the moment of revelation delivers a shock that the audience and the antagonist will never forget. The hospital corridor was alive with urgency, but inside the warmth and light of the emergency area, Aisha felt a wave of relief wash over her. The rain was still pounding outside, hammering the pavement, but the storm of fear and humiliation that had gripped her moments ago began to ebb. She leaned weakly against her mother, tears streaming down her face, but these tears were no longer of despair. They were of release, of survival, of vindication. The hospital staff had moved quickly, ushering Aisha into a private room. Nurses hurried to set up the necessary equipment for labor, their professional a stark contrast to the chaos she had endured outside. The pain in her belly intensified, but for the first time in hours, she felt safe, protected, and acknowledged. "Mom, I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come," Aisha whispered, her voice hoarse from crying and exertion. Her mother squeezed her shoulder firmly, her eyes softening. "You don't have to know, sweetheart. That's why I'm here. And that man, he will not get away with what he tried to do." Meanwhile, back outside, Adnan had not moved from his car. He stood rooted, drenched, pale, and humiliated, not just by the storm, but by the undeniable truth that he had been bested by a woman he had deemed powerless. Employees and bystanders had begun whispering about the confrontation, the revelation spreading quickly. The young woman he had mocked was connected to someone with immense authority and influence. A senior hospital administrator, having observed the incident, approached him cautiously. "Sir, we need to speak with you about what happened outside. Your behavior toward our patient was unacceptable." Adnan's mouth opened, then closed. His usual arrogance faltered, replaced by a jittery attempt at explanation that fell flat in the face of recorded eyewitness accounts and the public nature of his cruelty. His high-class facade, built on entitlement and wealth, crumbled under the weight of accountability. Inside, Aisha's labor intensified, but her fear had transformed. She was no longer paralyzed by helplessness. The support around her, the knowledge that the world would protect her, allowed her courage to bloom. Her mother held her hand tightly, whispering encouragement, guiding her through each contraction while the medical team expertly managed her care. "It's going to be okay, Aisha," her mother murmured, her voice a steady anchor amid the storm. "You've endured so much, but now we see the end of this trial. You are strong and your baby is strong. You will get through this." And then, after hours that felt like days, the moment arrived. The cries of a newborn pierced the air, sharp and miraculous. Aisha's heart expanded in an instant, the exhaustion, the fear, and the pain dissolving into a single, overwhelming joy. Sami, her 2-year-old son, had a sibling now, tiny, fragile, yet full of life. Aisha wept freely, cradling her newborn, while her mother offered quiet tears of relief. Nurses congratulated her, their smiles sincere, and for the first time that night the weight of the world felt lighter. But the story outside was not yet finished. Adnan had been summoned to the hospital administrator's office, where formal complaints had already been lodged. Witness statements, CCTV footage of the confrontation, and even recordings from bystanders had compiled a clear case. His behavior was cruel, abusive, and unacceptable. "You're not going to get away with this," the administrator said firmly. "We have protocols for harassment and endangerment of patients. You will face consequences, and it will be public if necessary. Understand?" Adnan, still wet and shaken, nodded mutely, the realization of accountability settling over him like a cold, unwelcome wave. For someone who had always relied on wealth and arrogance to bend the world to his will, this was a new, bitter lesson. Status could not shield cruelty. Inside the hospital, Aisha finally rested, the newborn in her arms and her mother by her side. The emotional toll of the day weighed heavily, but there was also a profound sense of triumph. She had survived, endured humiliation, and now justice was being served. The man who had mocked her, dismissed her, and threatened her dignity was facing consequences. The world had shifted, and for the first time she felt truly seen and valued. Later that evening, her mother spoke quietly to her, a mixture of pride and solemnity in her tone. "Aisha, you must remember this moment, not because of what he did, but because of how you endured it. You stood tall even when the world tried to break you. You have shown courage, resilience, and integrity. Those qualities matter far more than wealth or power." Aisha nodded, tears still glistening on her cheeks. "I never thought I'd make it through the storm." "Literally and figuratively," she said, voice trembling. "But now I feel different, stronger, like I can face anything." Her mother smiled, brushing a wet strand of hair from her daughter's face. "You can, and now with your baby here you will never be alone. You've earned this new chapter and no one can take it from you." Outside, news of the incident had begun to spread. Social media posts highlighted the cruelty Adnan had displayed and the sudden, powerful intervention by Aisha's mother. Public opinion swung rapidly with overwhelming support for Aisha. The hashtag Justice for Aisha began trending locally, drawing attention to the story of courage, survival, and the swift reckoning of arrogance. For Adnan, the consequences were immediate. He faced formal reprimands, public shaming, and potential legal scrutiny. His previously untouchable reputation began to unravel. Colleagues, friends, and business partners who had admired his wealth and influence were now forced to reckon with the image of a man who had publicly humiliated a vulnerable woman, an image impossible to erase. But the redemption wasn't only for Aisha in terms of justice. Her financial struggles were also addressed. Her mother, a figure of authority and means, ensured that she would no longer face danger, vulnerability, or financial instability. The baby was safe, her family strengthened, and the sense of fear that had haunted her days dissolved into relief and hope. Aisha, cradling her newborn, looked at her mother with gratitude. "Thank you for not letting him win, for being there when I couldn't fight anymore," she whispered. Her mother shook her head gently. "You fought all along, Aisha. I only helped when I could. Remember, character and courage are more powerful than money or status. Never forget that. The world may try to humiliate you, but if you hold on to what truly matters, integrity, compassion, and strength, you will always prevail." In the following hours, Aisha also found time to reconcile with those who had been passive bystanders. Hospital staff who had initially hesitated to intervene apologized, and their humility reinforced a lesson she had long understood. People could change when confronted with truth and courage. Meanwhile, Adnan's downfall accelerated. By the next morning, the story was front-page news in local media outlets. Video footage and eyewitness accounts were circulating widely, ensuring that his actions could not be ignored. The humiliation he had inflicted on Aisha now mirrored his own public embarrassment, creating a poetic symmetry to the events. And through it all, Aisha remained focused not on revenge, but on recovery, her children, and the newfound safety and stability she had been granted. Her strength had transformed her circumstances, and the consequences for the antagonist had been delivered in full measure, a justice as swift as it was satisfying. In a quiet moment as she fed her newborn and watched Sami play nearby, Aisha whispered to herself, "I survived, and I will thrive. No one can take this from me." The message was clear: courage, dignity, and resilience prevail over cruelty, arrogance, and ignorance. Aisha's journey from humiliation to empowerment is a powerful reminder that justice can arrive in the most unexpected ways, and that the strength within ordinary people can overturn the arrogance of the most privileged. 1 year had passed since that stormy night, the night that had changed everything for Aisha. The rain-soaked street, the cruel smirk of the arrogant billionaire, and the desperate contractions that had threatened to overwhelm her. Those memories were still vivid, but they had transformed into a story of triumph, resilience, and justice. Aisha's life had shifted dramatically. No longer struggling to make ends meet, she now lived in a modest but warm and comfortable home, safe for her and her children. The apartment was bright, filled with laughter, toys scattered across the floor, and the scent of home-cooked meals. Sami, now 3, ran freely in the living room, giggling as his newborn sibling toddled beside him, learning to walk. Aisha watched them, her heart full, her body still recovering from the past year, but her spirit soaring. Her mother remained a steadfast presence, supporting her in every decision and ensuring that Aisha never felt powerless again. The bond between them had strengthened even further. Their shared ordeal had cemented a foundation of trust, courage, and mutual respect that could withstand any storm. Aisha's career had also flourished. With her mother's guidance and influence, she began working as an advocate for women in vulnerable situations, those abandoned, mistreated, or underestimated. She visited hospitals, shelters, and community centers, sharing her story and offering resources, emotional support, and guidance to women facing hardships similar to what she had endured. The girl who had once knelt on the wet pavement, humiliated and desperate, was now a symbol of hope, resilience, and empowerment. Adnan, on the other hand, had faced the full consequences of his arrogance. His actions had been widely publicized, and his reputation had suffered irreparable damage. Colleagues and business partners distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with a man whose cruelty had been exposed to the world. Legal inquiries and public shaming had ensured that his behavior would not go unpunished. He attempted to rebuild his public image, but every effort was met with skepticism and ridicule. In his heart, he understood that wealth and status could no longer shield him from accountability. The lessons of humility and respect, lessons that should have come naturally, were now inescapable. Meanwhile, Aisha thrived. She had turned her pain into purpose, and the happiness that once felt unattainable had become her daily reality. Her children played, her home was filled with love, and she had the resources to ensure their safety and education. Financial security no longer seemed like a distant dream, but a tangible, lived reality. She had learned that true wealth is not measured in currency, but in courage, character, and the bonds we nurture with the people who love and protect us. One afternoon, sitting on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon, Aisha reflected on the past year. The storm that had once threatened to destroy her life now felt like a distant memory, a test she had passed not only with survival but with grace. She held her newborn close while Sami played nearby and whispered, We survived. And we will continue to thrive. Nothing can take this from us. Her mother joined her, holding a warm cup of tea. Do you see, Aisha? That night, the storm, the humiliation, they were all part of something greater. They revealed your strength, your courage, and the truth about people who hide behind wealth and arrogance. You are unstoppable, my daughter, and now the world can see it too. Aisha smiled, feeling the warmth of validation and love. She had learned a critical lesson. Power, when misused, brings downfall, but integrity, courage, and compassion create lasting triumph. She had faced injustice, endured pain, and emerged stronger, not by bending the world to her will, but by standing firmly in her truth. Sami ran over, holding his sister's hand. "Mama, look!" he exclaimed, eyes wide with excitement. Aisha bent down, smiling, and her heart swelled with an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The children's laughter, the safety of her home, and the knowledge that she had reclaimed her dignity were the true victories. The story of Adnan and Aisha became a cautionary tale, shared among colleagues, friends, and online platforms, a reminder that cruelty, arrogance, and a disregard for humanity are never without consequences. Adnan's fall served as an example of justice, swift and inevitable, while Aisha's rise became an inspiring symbol of resilience and triumph. Aisha often spoke at women's groups, hospitals, and community events, recounting her journey not for sympathy but to inspire. She shared her story openly, the fear, the desperation, the humiliation, and the ultimate vindication. Every time she spoke, she emphasized one crucial point. Character, courage, and integrity are far more powerful than wealth or status. No one can take them from you, and they will guide you through the darkest storms. Her audience, ranging from young mothers to women facing systemic challenges, listened intently. Some cried, some nodded, and some embraced her afterward, thanking her for showing that even in the bleakest moments, hope and justice could prevail. Her story was not just a personal triumph. It had become a source of empowerment for countless others. In private moments, Aisha reflected on her encounter with Adnan. She did not harbor hatred, but she understood the importance of accountability. Justice had been served, but her personal growth had been the true reward. She had transformed humiliation into strength, fear into purpose, and suffering into a mission. She had reclaimed her life, her dignity, and her future. The moral of the story became crystal clear to her and everyone who learned of it. We cannot control the cruelty of others, but we can control our response. Courage, integrity, and resilience will always outlast arrogance, entitlement, and injustice. Even the simplest interactions, the smallest acts of kindness or cruelty, can have a ripple effect. Aisha had experienced both extremes, and she had emerged wiser, stronger, and more compassionate. Her children would grow up knowing the value of perseverance, dignity, and moral courage, learning that true strength is not measured by wealth or status, but by the character we uphold in every challenge. 1 year later, the storm was a distant memory, but the lessons endured. Aisha walked through her neighborhood, holding her newborn in one arm, hand in hand with Sami, a smile lighting her face. Neighbors waved, some remembering the dramatic events of the previous year, others inspired by her transformation. She had become a living testament to the power of resilience and the inevitability of justice. Adnan, by contrast, had retreated from public life. His attempts to reclaim social or financial influence were met with skepticism and ridicule. Privilege alone could not erase the public record of his cruelty. Each time he encountered reminders of that night, news articles, whispers in the business world, or the viral footage that had circulated online, he felt the sting of accountability. The lesson was painful, unforgettable, and irreversible. Aisha, meanwhile, thrived not only because of justice served, but because she had reclaimed her agency. She had learned to trust herself, her instincts, and her courage. She had faced fear head-on and emerged victorious, and she now helped others do the same. Her story was no longer just her own. It had become a beacon of hope for countless people facing their own storms, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, strength and justice could prevail. Her mother squeezed her shoulder gently as they watched the sunset together. "Remember this, Aisha, life will test you. People will underestimate you, judge you, and sometimes try to harm you. But your courage, your integrity, and your heart will always guide you. That is your true power." Aisha nodded, eyes glistening. "I will never forget, Mom. I will teach my children and anyone I can reach that power is meaningless without character, and that every storm, no matter how fierce, can be survived." As they walked home, children laughing beside them, the final message of their journey was clear. Cruelty may strike, storms may rage, but dignity, courage, and resilience will always lead to triumph. Aisha's story became a testament to human strength and a reminder that justice, when combined with integrity and courage, is unstoppable. If Aisha's story inspired you, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible real-life stories of courage, resilience, and justice. Remember, your character matters more than appearances, your kindness can change lives, and no storm is too strong for those who refuse to give up.